Hello everyone, it's David from Automotive Press. I have a very fascinating video today because I am comparing my 2023 Lexus GX to the all-new Land Rover Defender 130 series, which is a longer version of the Defender models. They're both kind of competing in the same marketplace. This one's a bit more expensive than Lexus, but they both will likely cater to a similar type of market and buyers, so it's going to be fascinating and interesting to compare the two models side by side. In fact, I'm going to point out 15 differences between the 2023 Lexus GX and the 2023 Land Rover Defender 130. Let's go. Welcome back. So right off the bat, let's compare the build quality of these two models. My 2023 Lexus GX compared to the 2023 Land Rover Defender 130. Let's do the manufacturing quality of the panels and alignment first. We'll do the paint check, and also we do some other comparison between the two. And let me tell you all the difference between the GX versus the Defender. So first I'm going to do the manufacturing quality check using my gauge here. And the interesting thing is the Defender has the hood panel alignment right here, not over here like the GX. So I have to measure over here, but that's okay. 3 millimeter in terms of the hood alignment, and over here it's also 3 millimeters. So actually surprisingly good in terms of the panel gap. And then over here, front fender is also 3.1, and then over here is 3.8, and then back between the rear door and the rear fender is 3.2. So surprisingly good. If you were ever curious about the actual manufacturing quality of the panels, their alignment, so far in terms of this particular Defender 130, looks fantastic actually. Everything lines up. You can tell all the lines up here too. A little bit off here and a little bit off here, but actually pretty good. Almost as good as some of the Toyota models that we see. Let's compare to the Lexus. I know that you guys are thinking I shouldn't compare this side to this side, and therefore I'm gonna go to that side. But just so that you know, prior to doing this video, I checked all of the panel gaps and alignment on both sides of both cars. So I want to let you know that the left side and the right side is actually about the same. So on the GX, 3 millimeter here, 3 millimeter here, 3 millimeter also between front fender and door, and a little bit wider here at 4 millimeter, 3.9 to be honest, and 3 millimeters. So actually almost exactly the same as a Defender. In both models have a slightly wider gap between front door and rear door. That's always the case. But surprisingly, right now, in terms of just the panel gap alone, that Defender is probably the best Defender I've seen to date because the quality of the panel alignment is really good. What about compared to just the basic level of alignment and look and feel of all of the panels? I still do think that the Lexus is a little bit better because all the edge line up perfectly here and here, whereas in the Defender is slightly off. So definitely a little bit better, but not as much difference as you think between these two models, at least in terms of the panel alignment and the manufacturing quality of these sheet metals. What about the paint job? Well, we're going to take a look at the paint quality first, and then we're going to actually measure the paint thickness. And I suspect that the paint thickness might be more on this one than that one because usually European cars have a thicker paint. But in terms of the actual quality of the paint, generally speaking, Lexus has really, really good paint coming out of the Tahara factory, so I expect it to be better. And sure enough, I think it's pretty comparable, but the Defender has a little bit more orange peel, maybe 10-20% more orange peel. And that's a little bit of a characteristic of some of the European models. And also the gloss is not as consistent here compared to Lexus. I know we're comparing a darker color to the white color, so maybe it's not 100% fair comparison, but you know, to trained person like myself who's gone through many years of manufacturing, it doesn't matter what color it is, I can still compare the quality. And also over here, the general gloss and the amount of clear coat seems not as bright and not as consistent as the Lexus, which has a very consistent, almost perfect paint all the way through from back to the front and all the way around. So in terms of paint quality, I think the Lexus is definitely a little bit better, but it's not so bad on the Land Rover either. It's not any worse than most other European models that we come across. And then all these plastic panels also are actually pretty well built. On the Defender, there's lots of plastic pieces everywhere, and the bumper is actually solid plastic here and plastic here, and this is also plastic on the Lexus. In terms of paint matching, it's excellent over here, although on the darker color it's always easier to match than the lighter color, because you can tell it's a little bit off on the Lexus. Let's measure the paint thickness now to see whether or not there's more paint applied to this model than the Lexus. So now I have the paint thickness gauge. We're going to measure the total amount of paint above the sheet metal for both the Defender and the GX, and to see if there's any difference. Let's measure the metal of the hood here on the Defender. 131 microns, and which is about an average for European cars. Let's take a look at the Lexus in the middle of the hood here. 132. Surprisingly, the two are almost identical. What about the fenders? Let's take a look at the fender here. 111 on this side, and actually let me measure all the side panel here, and I'll go to the Lexus as well. 123, and the rear door 120, pretty consistent, which is a very important thing. You don't want the thickness to vary too much, because that means there was some kind of repair work done. 133, so a little bit thicker as you go along here, but pretty consistent. Let's go to the other side of the Lexus so that we're comparing the same side of the two vehicles, and let's see if the thickness is much different from the Defender. 116, and it was 111 over there, I believe. 132 is a little bit thicker, just like the Defender. Isn't that interesting? 125, pretty consistent also here, and one more check here. 135. So actually the two are pretty similar, which is surprising a bit. I was expecting the Defender to have a thicker paint, because typically in Europe they apply a little bit thicker coating for both the clear coat and also the undercoating and the base paint. But in this case, the two are almost identical in terms of thickness. And in the Defender, thankfully, the paint thickness is consistent, which tells me that there was no repair work done in manufacturing. Sometime in the factory, especially for European car makers, they make a mistake and they have to apply additional paint to correct it in the factory. And you can tell because the paint thickness is often 2 times or sometimes 3 times the normal thickness. But that isn't the case here. So I would say the paint thickness is more or less a tie. And in terms of paint quality, it's a little bit better on the GX. But right now, I'm actually pretty pleased and surprised that the Land Rover model here is almost equivalent to Lexus in terms of the exterior panel quality and exterior paint job. Now let me continue to show you more differences between the GX and the Defender. So I really pointed out 2 differences between these two in terms of the panel alignment and also the paint job. Are there other differences between the GX and the Defender? Well, there are actually quite a few. The third thing I want to point out to is the fact that the GX is still body-on-frame design. So you have a body that's separate from the frame underneath, and things like engine and transmissions are all installed on top of the frame when it comes to body-on-frame design. But this one, in case you didn't know, is not a body-on-frame. It's actually a unitized body or monocoque body design. So there are no separate frame. Although in monocoque design, what you end up with is underneath the body, they are part of a steel that's being welded together to create kind of like a frame style, so that there is still a structural rigidity underneath, but it is not separate frame. So that's a big difference between the two. So that was the third difference. The fourth difference is the origin of the two models. The Lexus GX is still built in Tahara factory in Japan, at perhaps one of the best factories in the world. There's no question that the most experienced Toyota and Lexus production workers work at Tahara. So that's where it's built, most likely to be one of the most reliable vehicles in the world. The Defender is built in a newer Jaguar Land Rover factory in Slovakia. So it is a different plant, but that plant is actually one of the better plants within JOR family of factories. And I have a lot of faith in that new factory because I know a number of people that work there, including some of the engineers, and they really worked hard to implement some of the Toyota production system into that system, which you can see today, because obviously they've done a really good job of trying to make the Defender as good as some of the world-class cars like the GX in terms of manufacturing. The fifth difference you need to know between these two models are the powertrain. The Lexus has a proven 4.6-liter V8 engine, made it to a 6-speed transmission. Yes, it is a bit of a dinosaur engine, only has 301 horsepower, but you know what? It's probably the most reliable engine in the world. It's super smooth, very refined, and it is a gas guzzler, but it has amazing level of refinement. Over here in the Land Rover, in this particular model, we have supercharged and turbocharged 3-liter 6-cylinder engine that is good for 395 horsepower, so more power definitely on this one. And also because it's supercharged and turbocharged, when you step on the gas, there is an immediate acceleration that is a little bit lacking in the Lexus GX. Also, this one has an 8-speed transmission, so it has 2 more than the Lexus GX. The sixth difference is the dimension of the two vehicles. The Defender is a little bit longer than the GX because this is a 130 series, which is a longer version. There's also a 110 version and even a 90 version, which is a 2-door model. And obviously each one of the models have a different exterior dimension, but as far as 130 is concerned, it is definitely longer and bigger than GX, and therefore you end up with quite a bit more space in the back as well as in the cargo space. Which brings me to the 7th difference. I got a lot of stuff back here right now getting ready for a fishing trip, but the dimension from here, end of this opening to the back of the second seat, is quite long. I don't have a measuring tape right now, but you can see how deep this one is compared to the GX, which also opens this way, but it has quite a bit less cargo space, both in terms of length and also in terms of opening. So definitely the Defender has a more cargo capacity compared to the GX. The 8th difference is that they both actually open this way, which is interesting, right? Because many of you guys said, why does it open this way as opposed to the other way? Isn't that the incorrect way? Well, actually for me, personally, by the way, I prefer this style than opening all the way to the top. I find this to be easy because I can open quickly, grab something, and close it again. And Defender has the same system here, same way of opening as well. But it's definitely a little bit of a smaller and lighter rear panel here, which is easier to open and close. And then the 9th difference is that in the Lexus, I can push this button and actually flip open this rear window, but I can't do that on the Defender, mainly because there is this external spare tire, which is a 10th difference. We have the external spare tire on the Defender in the outside, which gives it a cool design and cool look, but also extends the length even more. The GX has a traditional 4Runner approach, which means the spare tire is underneath, but you do get the full-size spare regardless, but it's definitely more difficult to get compared to Defender. The 11th difference is the interior, and this is where the biggest advantage exists for the Defender because it's way more up-to-date than this GX, which struggles with, kind of mixture of old and the new. They have improved it and added new technology not so long ago. So we do have a touch panel now with an actual Apple CarPlay, but the Apple CarPlay is wired only, not wireless. In the Defender, it is definitely wireless. And the 12th point I want to make is that in terms of the digital cluster, there isn't one for the GX. Just the middle section here is digital, but there's not much information that you can get from this dash panel. But on the Land Rover, which I'll show you in a second, it's fully digital. So now we're inside the Defender, and as I pointed out already, fully digital instrumentation, much more up-to-date and larger screen here, and then wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto on the Defender. But the 13th thing I want to point out is that the sunroof or moonroof here, it's the panoramic style, so there's a huge panel that opens up on this Defender, but on the GX we get the small traditional sunroof or moonroof. So obviously if you want more of an open feel, it's definitely better on the Defender. But overall, in terms of interior, clearly the Defender is better because this is an all new interior, beautiful interior design, and also most up-to-date technology on the Defender. So when the new Lexus GX comes out, probably end of this year or next year, then I'm sure they will update that and perhaps could even be better than the Defender. But right now, the interior of Defender is much better than the one in the Lexus GX. The 14th difference I want to point out is that the Defender has an electric power steering versus the hydraulic power steering in the GX. The GX is using old technology, so it is still using hydraulic power steering, which actually provides better feel from the road. And therefore, when you're driving the GX versus the Defender, the GX does feel a little bit more solid, and there's a better communication from the road to my hands, mainly because it's hydraulic power steering versus electric. The reason why most manufacturers have moved to electric power steering is because of the fact that it is more fuel efficient and doesn't use up as much of a gas. The 15th and the last difference between these two models I want to point out is the fact that GX only comes in one version. It's the V8 version with a 6-speed transmission. It comes in a couple of different trim levels, but they're all more or less the same model. Whereas the Defender, you have many different models. You can get the two-door version, which is the Defender 90 series, or the normal version, which is the 110, or this big version, which is the 130. And you can still get many different types of engine, including a V8 power as well. So a lot more selection in terms of models, in terms of size, and powertrain on the Defender, whereas the GX only comes one way. So there is a lot more choice to choose from if you're buying a Defender versus the Lexus. So what do you guys think of the comparison between the Land Rover Defender versus the Lexus GX? Which one would you buy? Or which one do you like? I know for a fact that this one is more reliable than the Defender over a longer period of time, and therefore if you're going to keep it for 10, 20, 30 years, perhaps the Lexus GX is a better buy. But if you're the type of person who like to change the car every few years, and maybe you're only leasing it for 2 or 3 years, you know what, the reliability in terms of long term might not matter anymore. And in that case, the Defender is actually a better car. It drives better, it's more up to date, and it has more room for the money. But it is also more expensive than the GX. So at the end of the day, you gotta let me know which one you like better. And of course, some of those decisions will change when Lexus finally introduces the all-new version of the Lexus GX, which should come out maybe end of this year or early 2024. And in that case, the new Lexus GX could be much better than the Defender. But for now, the Defender is a better car in terms of technology, features, and overall drivability. I hope you enjoyed my video. If so, would you kindly give me a thumbs up, make some comments, and maybe you can subscribe if you haven't done so. I appreciate you being here. Until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.